What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for Sports. You've often heard me say that the mainstream sports media love to use black men as villains. Why is that the case? Well, because partially it's profitable, because we are at the very bottom when it comes to power in this country. Structurally, we don't have a lot of power. Yeah, we have disposable income, which they will cater to, but as far as our overall political power, social power, influence, it's at the very bottom. So we don't have a lot of people at top rooting for us. You know, we don't have people at the top who naturally are in defense of us. So they use us when it's convenient to be villains. And this country loves to have, like I said before, the country feels comfortable. It's even conditioned to have certain people as villains. Think I'm lying? Look at what happened to Russell Westbrook. Basketball player became the villain in sports because he turned the ball over. Everybody turns the ball over. Trae Young turns the ball over with more frequency than anybody in NBA history, but nobody cares because it doesn't fit any narrative. That's why I had such a seething disdain for LeBron, because in that scenario, LeBron wore the white hat and Russell Westbrook wore the black hat. But the granddaddy of all this goes back to O.J. Simpson. O.J. proved to the media, by the way, the left-leaning media was supposed to be, quote-unquote, our allies. It proved to them, as well as the right-wing media, led by Nancy Grace and them. But still, all the media, it proved to them that having a black villain can be especially profitable. And they're doing it again in O.J.'s death, some 30 years after the murders of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson on June 12, 1994. Here we are, April of 2024. There are people now who, despite the fact that O.J. was acquitted criminally, they're going around telling you, well, it's a fact that the man was guilty, when they have no facts to back that up, other than I'm white and I'm right. So shout out to Judge Joe Brown, who went on enemy territory, and by enemy territory, I'm talking about Jesse Peterson, and gave his reasons as to why he believes that O.J. Simpson is innocent. Now, I used to talk about these things on YouTube, but I don't go into detail anymore about that because, I just don't think YouTube's the right place for me to espouse my beliefs on that issue. I'll talk about it on the Patreon. But I have to say that Judge Joe Brown verified virtually everything that I talked about on my Patreon just the other day about what I think happened. This is what he had to say. Let me see if I can play the audio. Sorry for all the background noise. 1 second.
Did O.J. Simpson get away with murder?
No, I looked at all the evidence they had and talked to the experts. They never should have brought the charge against him. And 4 of the chief detectives that were involved in that O.J. case wound up doing time in California for planting evidence. And as a matter of fact, if you saw the entire trial, there are several instances where evidence was planted and it's recorded on tape. The main reason the American public thinks she got away with something is because there was a sleaze known as Nancy Grace who's still around, and that was her first reporting thing. And she hyped that and put a lot of falsity out there, and the American public believed it because that was the only person they were here. I saw the entirety of the evidence. Nicole and Rod Goldman got their throats slit from ear to ear, their tongues pulled out of the slit with a pair of pliers. The fatal injury was a stab by a left-handed person. OJ was right-handed.
What?
It went in. and it did that damage. There were no peripheral strikes. The footprints in the blood showed that somebody with a size 9 shoe, 9.5 shoe, and somebody with a size 9 and somebody with a 10.5 were there on the scene and did it. One of my late brothers actually was the expert the state was going to call until he refuted it. The glove man I know personally, his name is Richard Zuckerwar. He took a tracing of everybody's hand. It was a size large glove that fit Furman. And OJ had a 2XL, which was way too big. Johnny Cochran knew that. So if it does not fit, you must acquit. And you can see Furman actually plant the bloody socks on a video that the jury saw that Nancy Grace refused to talk about. The DNA evidence that condemned them, she said, if you saw what went on, and I recorded all of it and looked at it, the expert said, this doesn't exclude 96,000 people in the LA area, and the person that donated this is from the Northeast Mediterranean or from Sicily.
I got it. That's a no.
Yeah. That's just a bit of the things that went on in that trial that I heard and many other people heard who are being impartial and listening to the evidence that started swaying us to believe that he was innocent. Because I'm going to tell you something. At the very beginning, when the prosecution was giving their case, I thought that OJ was guilty myself. I did. Until I started hearing the defense. And they brought up so many things. And he's not even getting into the timeline. The timeline virtually made it impossible for OJ to have committed the crimes. Remember, I mean, I'm not saying OJ was an old man. He was 47 years old at the time, 46 going on 47 years of age, and he had bad knees. Yeah, he was a great athlete at one point in time, but this is a man who had played football, his body was ravaged by football, had to retire when he was 32 years old because of bad knees. Remember? He was 31, 32 years old, and he retired because of bad knees. Now, fast forward, he's 47. OJ, at that point, if you remember correctly, he was walking with a limp. So this is the same dude that scaled a wall and was moving around like Nijinsky? Come on now. Use your common sense. Then the timeline, like I said, didn't make sense. Then the evidence with the neighbor that said that she saw 4 men running away from the scene of the crime. They did everything they could to discredit her so that she didn't have to stand trial. So when all this evidence came in, that's when I started saying, you know what, man? I don't think he did it. But like he said, like Judge Joe Brown said, Nancy Grace and others, for whatever reason, because at the time it didn't make sense to me, but now I get it because I was 14, 15 years old at the time listening to this trial. But, you know, I didn't know how this country was. But Nancy Grace wouldn't report on these things. And that's why, partially, like he said, there's a disconnect between what some people, the majority of people who have to be, you know, and let's not forget, we're talking about the 90s. Okay? This country's always had an issue with race, but it was even worse then. So that played a part too. But anyway, but you know, I'm gonna say this. There are dastardly people of all races. There are despicable human beings from any race of the world, any race in the world. But there is a stereotype that for some reason we have a monopoly when it comes to being criminals. We see it talked about here. We see trolls talking about it. We see hate groups talking about it. You know what I'm saying? I've had, me personally, you know how many jobs I've lost because someone listened to me on the phone, like you listen to me on video, and they look at my resume, and then when I come in and they see a big, huge black man, they totally just change up because they don't feel comfortable with me in the office. You know how many times it's happened to me? So don't tell me this country, you know, has turned the corner totally on race. It hasn't. Yeah, it's less of it, But a lot of people just know how to hide it more. Even liberals. I have liberal friends tell me that they had, so-called liberal friends who would grin in my face, but behind closed doors, you would think they were in a Klan rally. So that's all I got to say about that one, man. Shout out to Judge Joe Brown for keeping it real. Tell me what you guys think.